This is Based in Fact, a true crime podcast. Join host Lisa O'Brien as she examines America's most infamous true crime cases through the lens of the court, not the court of public opinion. This show will bring you the facts as they were established in the courts and the basis for the decisions of the appeals courts. Here's your host, Lisa O'Brien.
In episode 12, Kyle and I are talking about State of Oklahoma versus Richard Eugene Glossip. Glossip was convicted of arranging the murder of his boss, Barry Van Treese, at the Best Budget Inn in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, on January 7th, 1997. In part one, we'll look at the case against Glossip, the legal proceedings that included 2 trials, a direct appeal, and state and federal post-conviction claims. We'll also talk about Glossip's 2015 execution dates and his challenge to Oklahoma's use of midazolam in its execution protocol, and the September date that did not go forward because of a drug mix-up. And we'll get started. Hi, Kyle. How are you? Welcome back.
Yeah, good afternoon, Lisa. Great to be back. Good to join again. For the true crime fans of our podcast, I join you today from Kilgore, Texas, which was a site of one of our early episodes, the infamous KFC murders in Kilgore, Texas.
Yeah. So how are things in Kilgore? You have a lot of fireworks?
Yes, absolutely. It is warm like most of the state, and looking forward to some fireworks this evening or tomorrow as well.
All right. Yeah, we have, we're going to have some official, unofficial fireworks. I live near a sketchy area, so there will probably be gunfire. And we'll never know whether it's just dummies firing into the air or somebody being shot.
It's always the New Year's Eve, July 4th. Please don't shoot your guns in the air because the bullets do come down.
And we've actually had in New Orleans, we've had people killed by gunfire. By bullets coming down and hitting them in the heads. Usually in the French Quarter, in a densely populated area. So yeah, this is part one. The Glossip case has been going on since 1997. And I think no matter how diligent we are, we're not going to get through everything in a couple of hours in one episode. So we're going to do 2 episodes about it. We're going to look at the case against Glossip now, and then the latest post-conviction claims that began after his execution date was set for September 22nd of 2022.
Sounds great.
All right. So, of course, first of all, we start with the victim, Barry Allen Van Treese, who was born on December 3rd, 1942 in Kansas City, Missouri. His parents were James Braswell, called JB, and Pauline Bowden Van Treese. The Van Treese family, apparently, Barry's parents owned hotels or motels as well. So this is probably where he...
the family business
was introduced to the family business. And I think his father, like Barry, was also, in addition to owning motels, he was involved in other types of businesses. I think he had a very successful electronics business. But I didn't do a deep dive into Barry Van Treese's family history. Because again, the case precedes the internet, or the spread of the internet. And so there's not a lot of information out there. Barry was probably the oldest child. He had brothers Kenneth, Gary, who died in 1980, a sister named Alana, and he had 2 other brothers and a sister who I didn't find easily identified and did not find names for. He attended Lawton High School and graduated in 1961. He attended Cameron University, and it says he graduated in 1963, which is pretty impressive to finish in 2 years. He went to Arkansas State University for a time, and then he earned a master's in banking and finance from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. He was employed in banking for many years. He also was interested in electronics, and he began with motels as well, kind of, I think, as a side business.
Yeah.
On March 3rd, 1979, he married Donna Sue Calloway, and they had 7 children: Barry, Brett, Derek, Ben, Daniel, Bridget, and Joe. He was also a member of the Lawton Fort Sill Amateur Radio Club and a member of First Baptist Church. And his cause of death was blunt force trauma and blood loss from injuries he sustained in an attack at the motel on January 7th, 1997. Perpetrator, Richard Eugene Glossip. He was born February 9th, 1963, not 1964, typo, in Galesburg, Illinois. His parents were Heron and Sally Glossip. He was one of many, many children. Sally's obituary says 16. I know I was able to identify Robert, Kathy, Nancy, Terry, and he had, like I said, 5 to 10 additional or 11 additional siblings.
They're big families, both his, he grew up in a big family and he had a lot of kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had 4 kids. So compared to his family, that's quite small. But imprisonment and divorce may have impacted his procreation. He was divorced twice prior to incarceration. His first wife was named Jackie. They had 3 children: Christina, Erica, and Richard Jr. And then Missy King was the second wife. They had Tori Lynn. They were divorced again. He was engaged to a woman by the name of Deanna Wood at the time of this crime. She was living in the motel with him and helping him manage it. They were never married. They were never really officially engaged, but he says he was engaged. He has subsequently married 2 more times in prison. In 2018, a young woman by the name of Lee Joy Jurassic, who he was married to from 2018 to 2021. Glossip, in his divorce petition, it's a lot of freaking nerve for a man in prison to file for divorce against a woman on the outside. He requested spousal support because he and his spouse had disparate financial conditions.
You mean he wasn't able to make a lot of money while being on death row?
And and this also says something about his character. He doesn't care who he gets the money from as long as he gets the money. So, people make a note of that because that's a character, that shows his character right there. He recently, as we saw, married a young woman by the name of Leah Frederique Roger, who is an anti-death penalty advocate. He did not have any criminal convictions, but I think he had a pretty substantial driving record.
Yeah.
Pretty substantial contacts with police because of his driving record. And he says he tells the police his license was suspended, but he had a car and he was driving it around. So again, we have somebody who shows a lack of respect for law and law enforcement. He's going to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it.
Yeah.
And then he also was, just prior to Barry Van Treese's murder, based on evidence introduced at his trial, he was accused of embezzlement from the Best Budget Inn motel that he managed on behalf of Mr. Van Treese. And I think it's also important to note that while he didn't carry out the murder, he is the person who sought the murder to be done. And I'm just going to say right off the bat, to me, in my opinion, that makes him more morally culpable and more legally culpable than the person who carried out the murder.
Yeah, so that's a good grounding, because catching up. So he's not accused of actually executing Mr. Van Treese, but he's the one that set it all in motion, planned it, and had the other man who was convicted actually carry out the crime.
Correct. Now, the facts established at trial are that in 1995, Barry Van Treese hired Glossip to manage the Best Budget Inn in Oklahoma City. Van Treese had learned about Glossip from a friend of his, a 1% who had a 1% interest in the motels by the name of Cliff Everhart, who apparently was some kind of character. Glossip earned $1,500 a month and was provided with an apartment with all expenses paid by the motel. He also earned a 5% bonus of total revenue in excess of $18,000 earned by the motel per month. The $18,000 figure was set by the Van Treeses as the sum that they needed to meet all of their business and personal expenses each month. In 1996, Glossip did earn bonuses for each month between January and November. However, 5% over $18,000 did not really amount to a whole lot of money, with the exception of a couple of months. Most of his bonuses were between $50 and $25.
Yeah, and for those of you listening who are not familiar, I mean, these best budget inns, and they're kind of type, they're kind of chains, and they're these kind of roadside motels that they're maybe not the worst motels like you see on TV with, just crime and, prostitution everywhere, but they're not exactly, the Marriott either. These are pretty low rent, probably just below a Motel 6, barely.
Right.
You're lucky if you get clean sheets and some clean towels and you don't find something disgusting in the room.
Yeah. Barry and his wife, Donna, also owned a second property in Tulsa. The procedures for handling money collected at two properties were also different. Receipts for the Oklahoma City property, and receipts, when I refer to receipts, I mean cash, traveler's checks, and credit card receipts. The income of the motel generated, and that's in the business. Those are often just called receipts. Receipts for the Oklahoma City property were kept in a FedEx envelope in the manager's apartment with the registration cards. The manager reported the number of rooms rented and the amount collected via phone call to Donna Van Treese each day. At the Tulsa property, the money collected was deposited into a bank account. So the situations at the two motels were a little different for the managers. And the opportunities for monkey business for those managers were different. The Van Treese family did suffer several personal tragedies, which included the sudden death of Donna's mother and the death of Barry's mother during surgery in 1996. Barry had retired from banking, I believe, because of his health, and had more or less gone to full-time operation of the two motels. But his efforts to oversee the operation of the motels declined, resulting in fewer trips to the properties during the last half of 1996. And those trips were limited to collecting receipts and documents and leaving. Trips to perform repairs and refurbish rooms in the motels were non-existent during that period of time. And that explains how Richard Glossip was able to take advantage. And under Richard Glossip's management, the motel did decline from just below a Motel 6 to a dive.
Yeah, he let a lot of bad stuff happen.
Yeah. Including allowing his drug dealer brother to live on the property and sell drugs. He also had people working for the motel who were not paid and who had no paperwork, who were just, working in exchange for their rooms, which is not ever a good situation. So by the time of Barry's visit on January 6, 1997, the conditions had become deplorable. Many rooms were uninhabitable and others were being rented off the books by Glossip, who, like we said, allowed his brother to deal drugs on the property. And in my personal opinion, I believe any crimes being committed at the hotel or the motel by his brother or by Justin Sneed were being committed with Glossip's approval and for a cut. In addition to a plan to survey the rooms and document maintenance issues, Barry intended to retrieve missing money and records from Glossip. Apparently, the weekend before this visit, the receipts, the money collected by Glossip Friday, Saturday, and Sunday were missing. Or Friday and Saturday were missing. And Glossip is saying that he was averaging $400 to $500 a day. So that's a significant amount of money. And a lot of what we know about this stuff comes from Glossip, either statements to other witnesses, statements to police. And this is where the suspicion of Glossip came by police when they were investigating.
Yeah, so it's important always to remember all the, there's no magical police conspiracy to target a poor innocent man. All of, the reason he's targeted is because stuff that he says.
Yeah, exactly. So Barry was intending to retrieve the missing money and records. He and Donna were also discussing firing Glossip and the manager of the Tulsa motel because they felt both properties were being mismanaged. And just kind of as an aside, while there's a lot of talk in the media about records actually not showing embezzlement or the state having proven embezzlement at trial that never happened, or the allegation that embezzlement wasn't happening, it doesn't matter whether money was being embezzled or not. Barry and Donna Van Treese believed it was. And they were going to act upon that belief. And that is where Richard Glossip, who prided himself on his clean record, would have felt probably put upon, because in his mind, he's done so much for that motel and so much for Barry Van Treese. And how dare Barry Van Treese accuse him of committing any crime?
Yeah.
And I believe, again, it's only my speculation, I believe that at some point during his conversation with Barry Van Treese, the threat was made that the police were going to be called if he didn't find that $5,000 that was missing, or $800 that was missing, whatever the amount was from the weekend. Justin Sneed, who was also known as Justin Taylor, had arrived at the motel in Oklahoma City with a roofing crew from Texas. He became friends with Glossip and soon quit with his brother or stepbrother to become the hotel's maintenance man. He earned no salary but had a free room at the motel. An admitted drug user, Sneed had been accused of breaking into cars and stealing from guest rooms to support his habit. But again, when you have somebody who's not making any money, what do you expect them to do if they do drugs? They're not earning any money to spend on drugs. So what do you think they're going to do?
Right.
They're going to steal from rooms. And again, I think if Justin was doing this, he was doing it and Glossip knew about it and Glossip was getting a cut. And, that's my opinion.
Yeah, because he had to be, right? I mean, he's the manager. He knows everything that's going on. He knows the long-term folks that stay there.
Mm-hmm.
His eyes and ears are everywhere. Nobody's doing anything out of there without him knowing.
Right. And I mean, his brother's a drug dealer and his brother's living in a room at the motel dealing drugs. I don't think that was under Richard Glossop's nose. I don't think he was oblivious. I think he knew exactly. And he was either taking the rent money and putting it in his own pocket and not reporting it. And apparently that was a problem at the motel, or he was charging Bobby a cut. Barry arrived at the Oklahoma City property between 5:30 and 6 p.m. on January 6, 1997. He took care of payroll. He checked the paperwork maintained by Glossop and picked up money, again referred to as the receipts, that had been collected since his last visit. There's a discrepancy between whether it was 5 days or 9 days. In Glossop's statement, it was 9. So, but then there's the missing receipts. So that's kind of unclear. Barry left for Tulsa at about 7:50 p.m., taking the key to room 102 with him. According to testimony at trial, he'd issued an ultimatum to Glossop to produce missing business records and receipts collected during the past weekend. Barry and Donna also believed Glossop had embezzled about $6,000 over the past year from their business, and some witnesses testified that Barry had threatened to contact police. Barry arrived in Tulsa between 11 and midnight on the 7th of January. The Tulsa manager, William Bender, reported that Barry told him 2,400 registration cards were missing in Oklahoma City, and the weekend receipts had not been deposited. Barry checked the Tulsa property for off-the-books tenants, issued payroll, collected business records, and left after about 45 minutes. At 2:30 a.m., Glossop and his girlfriend, Deanna Wood, closed the office and went to bed. At around 4:15 or 4:30 a.m., John Beavers, a tenant, heard glass breaking around room 102 and observed a broken window and glass on the sidewalk, meaning the window was broken from inside the room. Sneed later testified that when the window was broken during his attack on Barry Van Treese. During the early morning hours, around 5 o'clock, Sneed woke Glossop and Deanna. He reported to Glossop that he killed Barry, but Glossop lied to Deanna and told her that Sneed said 2 drunk cowboys had broken the window in room 102. Glossop also gave inconsistent statements about the cowboys, telling some that Sneed rented the room to them and others that they broke the window during a fight outside the room. Later that morning, Glossop helped Sneed place a piece of plexiglass on the outside of the window and a shower curtain over the broken window inside the room, meaning that on at least one occasion, he was inside room 102 with Barry Van Treese's body. Glossop made several conflicting statements to others about Barry's whereabouts that morning. Billy Hooper, the desk clerk, arrived at 8 or 8:30 that morning. She testified she was surprised to find Glossop up at that hour. Glossop told her Barry had gone out for breakfast and to buy construction supplies. Donna became concerned later that morning because Barry was diabetic and she hadn't heard from him. Glossop told her that he'd seen Barry that morning and that he was fine. He repeated a lie about Barry buying supplies for room renovations to other people that morning. That afternoon, Glossop and Deanna left the motel to run errands. They cashed Glossop's check, bought new glasses to replace Glossop's broken ones, and Glossop bought a cheap engagement ring for Deanna, spending about $100. And by
I mean, not to just random comment, but I'm always on all of these cases. You feel like, why do all these people, if they're supposedly innocent, they make conflicting reports? They just basically lie. It just doesn't make any sense. If you're innocent, you don't know anything about a crime, why would you just make up that you saw the killer? I mean, you saw the victim.
No, he didn't. He's denied seeing the victim. He repeatedly denied having seen Barry Van Treese. He denied ever entering room 102 to police. But I think later he testified at maybe his first trial, or admitted to his attorneys, and his attorneys conceded that he was in there and helped hang the shower curtain. So he was in there at least one time, but like I said, he lied and denied being in the room.
Right.
Initially. But he eventually admitted it and did admit to having been in there at least one time. I don't know how that came up. It may have been, like I said, testimony in his first trial, which even though he didn't testify at the second trial, the prosecution could have used that during the first trial. He could have also admitted it to Deanna or someone else who then testified about it during the trial as a statement against interest. So yeah, he didn't claim to have seen Barry's body, but he gave a statement that put him in the room.
I thought he testified that he saw him that morning after he had been killed.
Well, he does. He testifies about seeing him, but we'll get to that a little bit later too.
Gotcha.
But anyway, yeah, he did tell people he saw him going to breakfast and that he was going to get construction supplies because they're going to renovate all the rooms. They're going to do 3 rooms a day until they finish the motel.
Yeah, it's just weird.
And then they're going to go to
all
Tulsa
these guys lie about stuff. It's like, why would you lie? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't tell the desk clerk, nope, don't know where he is. He went to Tulsa and never came back.
Right, exactly. It's like, yeah.
Didn't tell his wife, maybe we should be concerned and call the police right now because we didn't see him. He never came back. But he told her, I saw him, he's fine. That afternoon, again, they went off and later on we'll talk about that shopping trip and what Glossip would have had left from his paycheck. At around 3:00 p.m., Barry's car was found parked at the Weoki Credit Union and Billy was summoned to identify it. She then paged Glossip to come back to the motel. Yet again, when he came back to the motel, even though he knew since the early morning hours that Sneed had killed Barry and that Barry's car had been found, Glossip didn't tell anybody that Sneed told him he killed Barry, that Barry was in room 102. And, he went out with Deanna and Cliff Everhart on a search of dumpsters and fields around the property when he knew exactly what had happened and where Barry Van Treese was. So he lied by omission.
Right.
And sometime after being tasked with searching rooms, looking for Van Treese and skipping room 102, Sneed disappeared. He walked away. But he didn't leave Oklahoma City. He actually went back to the roofing crew that he had come into town with and went back to work for them. At around 4:30 p.m., Officer Tim Brown joined the search for Barry, and Glossip made, once again, conflicting statements to Brown. He told Brown several different stories, including that he had seen Barry that morning. He also failed to mention Sneed's early morning confession and continued trying to steer people away from room 102, even though he knew exactly where Barry was. Between 10 and 10:30 p.m., Brown and Everhart, after comparing notes on Glossip's various statements, decided to check room 102 and found Barry's body. He was lying face down, covered by the bedspread and sheet from the bed, which had been stripped. They found a shower curtain duct taped to the inside of the window and plexiglass on the outside with caulking to seal the gaps. They also found glass stacked on a chair inside the door and a roll of duct tape. A pocket knife covered in blood was also found under Barry's body. Glossip was contained and continued trying to cover up the murder and Sneed's involvement. He denied making statements reported by Brown and Everhart. He claimed things were getting confused. He claimed too many people were asking him too many questions and things were getting misinterpreted or misconstrued. But which he didn't use, he said misconstrued, which is hilarious. He claimed things were getting confused. Even when detectives told him that they knew he knew more than he was telling, he lied and denied any knowledge of what happened. This is, again, during his interview on January 8th. immediately after Barry Van Treese's body was, or in the early morning hours after Barry Van Treese's body was found. Due to a lack of probable cause, police were forced to then release him. And again, they haven't talked to Sneed, so they know nothing about Sneed's involvement. Glossip hasn't said anything about Sneed's involvement. He said, I had a feeling, but he never said he did it, and he told me he did it.
Right.
And he lied to them, and they know he's lying. I mean, they have no doubt that he's lying to them, but they just don't have anything to prove it.
Horse, but that's always, that's always the theme. It's like, if you're innocent and you're not involved in this at all, why do you keep lying? Why are your statements inconsistent? Why do you report seeing the victim alive when he was clearly dead before? Like, why?
Right.
I mean, all the inconsistent statements. There's no reason to lie.
Yeah. On January 8th and 9th, Glossip began selling his possessions, including furniture, a TV, and vending machines. He sold Everhart an aquarium and told him he was moving on. This is why I called Glossip a dog ate my homework kind of liar, because he will make a statement like this and he'll say that I'm not running. I won't run. I'm not leaving. But you told Everhart you're moving on. What do you think that implies? That you're leaving Oklahoma City, dumbass. But police were keeping tabs on Glossip after his release, and they were informed that Glossip was making plans to leave town. After a visit with attorney David McKenzie, who represented Julius Jones, by the way, Glossip was arrested and questioned again by detectives. McKenzie had tried to help Glossip by telling detectives that he wasn't going to speak to them, but Glossip ignored McKenzie's advice and waived his right to counsel. He also did not pay McKenzie, even though he would claim that he was selling belongings to pay for an attorney. It was on January 9th when he was questioned again after being arrested and having police seize $1,757 from him in cash, that Glossip finally admitted that Sneed had confessed to killing Barry Van Treese, and he tried to justify and deny his false statements on the 7th and 8th by again saying so many people were asking me questions. I got confused. I'm easily confused. I'm not good with times. Every dog ate my homework kind of excuse. And when all else failed, I didn't say that. That's not what I said. They even bring Tim Brown in, and Glossip's like, I don't want to call you a liar, Tim, but I didn't say that. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Right.
Again, as I mentioned, Sneed had gone back to work with his old roofing crew, but he was eventually arrested on January 14th, 1997. Now, just to kind of beat a dead horse on this one, I think it's really important because Glossip's words are what made him the suspect as having had some part in the murder. I want to go through his statements to people and police to kind of, I guess, make it clear exactly why he was a suspect with police from the get-go and why he was a very good suspect for police from the get-go. Billy Hooper, something that Glossip will deny, is that he asked her to pay the cable bill with her own money on January 6th so that Barry wouldn't find out that it had been disconnected. So the cable bill for the motel, even though Glossip was supposed to be paying it, was not getting paid. Why do you think that is? Maybe because the money to pay the cable bill was going in Glossip's pocket.
Yeah, a few questions. Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, Glossop will say because Barry didn't want to pay it, but why would, if that was the case, why would Glossop want Billy Hooper to pay the bill so Barry wouldn't find out it gotten disconnected? Again, dog ate my homework
Yeah, exactly.
kind of thing. Sometimes Glossop's denials don't make any sense. He told Billy Hooper when she got there at 8 or 8:30, which he was also up to help Justin Sneed hang the plexiglass on the outside of room 102, that Barry got up early and had gone to breakfast and was going to get materials. They were going to start working on the motel. And that was on the 7th. He also told her that Barry rented room 102 to two drunks who broke the window. Don't put it on the housekeeping report. He said he and Sneed would clean themselves. So he's already at 8:30 in the morning trying to keep people from going near 102 and lying about how the window got broken. Even though, again, we know Sneed told him how the window got broken. At 2:33 p.m., Billy got a call from Wyoke Credit Union about finding Barry's car in the parking lot. The car was recognized because he had a ham radio operator's personalized license plate with his call sign. And the credit union people apparently knew Barry's car. Cliff Everhart, this was probably all on the 7th in the afternoon, because I think Cliff Everhart got there after Glossop returned from Walmart. Glossop appeared to comply with a search of all the rooms. Glossop helped search the area around the motel with Everhart and Deanna, again, knowing Barry was in 102 dead. Glossop had a liquidation sale and sold everything he owned. Glossop said he was moving on. Glossop apparently told Everhart that Barry arrived about 2:30 to 3 a.m. from Tulsa and went to bed. Glossop told Everhart he saw Barry at 7 a.m. when he left the motel to get supplies. Glossop told Everhart he rented room 102 to a couple of drunk cowboys who broke the window. Although the window, he tried to claim later that they broke it from the outside, fighting outside the room. He also told Everhart and Tim Brown that people in an upstairs room could have been responsible for Barry's disappearance since they disappeared without checking out. Donna Van Treese, he spoke to her in the afternoon after they found Barry's car. He may have spoken to her in the morning, though. It's kind of unclear. But again, he told her that he saw Barry between 7 and 7:30 a.m., told that Barry told him he was going to get supplies for the motel and would be back later. Quite a feat. Maybe Glossop had a Ouija board. He told Donna that Barry looked and sounded fine when he saw him at 7:30 a.m. And Glossop also promised to check all the rooms around the motel to search for Barry. Well, he did check room 102. Kayla Pursley, who was a long-term tenant at the motel, who also worked at the Sinclair gas station across or right near the property. He told her that two drunks got into a fight and threw a footstool through the window in room 102, and that he and Sneed threw them off the property. He told Caleb Hursley that somebody got cut cleaning up the glass, because I think there was blood on the window or blood on the glass on the outside of the window. And then he tried to tell her that she saw one of the drunk cowboys at the Sinclair station that morning. So, why would he tell her you saw him when he knew that wasn't how the window got broken? Again, dog ate my homework.
Yeah, there's always some excuse or something that just doesn't make basic sense.
And then Jackie Williams, who was the housekeeper at the property, he told her don't clean the downstairs room, that he would clean them with Sneed. So he's trying to keep people from going to room 102, and that was in the morning. He told Officer Tim Brown that he last saw Barry walking through the motel parking lot at 7 a.m. He told Brown that Sneed told him a couple drunks got into a fight and broke the window, and he had to take him off the property. He said he saw Barry after the window was broken, which a long-term resident heard that at like 4:30 in the morning. Then he later told Brown he thought he saw Barry that morning, but he wasn't sure because his glasses were broken and he doesn't see good. And then he also said that everything started getting confused. And the last time he remembered seeing Barry was 8 p.m. the night before, when he picked up the payroll money right before he left for Tulsa. Then he later denied saying he saw Barry at 7 a.m. And again, Tim Brown is one of the people that he tried to say that the people in the upstairs room that checked out, that disappeared without checking out, could have been responsible for Barry's disappearance. So he's trying to keep, not only trying to keep people away from 102, he's trying to keep people from suspecting Sneed. So, dog ate my homework.
Yeah, he clearly knows something.
So on the 8th, after he'd been questioned by police, he talked to William Bender, who was the manager at the Tulsa motel. He told William Bender that Barry was beaten to a bloody pulp, that he was found cold as ice, dead as a doornail. Glossip claimed he knew who did it, but he was in fear for his life. He told Bender to get out of the Tulsa hotel because it's going to be brought down. He sold his personal property, which he admitted to Bender, and he said he was moving on. Again, like he told Everhart. And he wonders why, when he walks out of David McKenzie's office on the 9th, that cops are going to arrest him. Gee. BMO, this is going to come into play later, so I want to go into something. When he was initially interviewed by detectives BMO, or inspectors BMO and Cook, on January 8th, 1997, some things happened that later next week we're going to find don't make sense with what they're claiming now. Okay. But I won't spoil it. BMO introduced himself and Cook to Glossip at the beginning of the interview, which gives no indication that either of them know Glossip from Adam. Glossip does not mention or give any indication that he knows BMO, or claim or remind BMO that, yeah, I know you, I reported you, or I filed a report on you or a complaint against you. And again, throughout the interview, there's no sense that BMO knew Glossip or Glossip knew BMO. Glossip gives a little bit of his history. He ran a hotel called the Grand Continental for 4 years. Then he ran the Best Budget for 2, and he was administered Miranda warnings. Glossip's story is that he called Donna on the 6th looking for Barry because Billy was waiting on her check and was refusing to leave until she was paid. He said the last time he saw Barry was when he left for Tulsa at 7:50 p.m. He knew the time because Deanna directed him to look at a clock. At 5 a.m., as he and Deanna were getting ready to go to sleep, he heard tapping on the door and then along the wall. He got up and he opened the door and found Sneed, whom he called Justin Taylor throughout this interview. Now, apparently, Sneed did go by the name Justin Taylor, but I firmly believe Glossip always knew him as Justin Sneed. And so he's giving police an alias used by Justin Sneed, never saying the name Sneed during either of his interviews. Again, he's protecting Sneed. He doesn't want Sneed to get caught because he knows if Sneed gets caught, he's going to be in trouble. And he's trying to convince them he's such a good guy, and he's a law-abiding citizen, and he doesn't have anything to do with this. And he knows nothing. He's Sergeant fucking Schultz. So Again, I'm going to refer to Sneed as Sneed in these statements, but he always claimed his name was Justin Taylor. He never identified him as Justin Sneed. He told them the lie about Sneed telling him the two Bronx broke the window in room 102 and that Sneed ran him off the property. He said he noticed a knot on Sneed's head that Sneed told him happened when he dozed off in the shower and hit his head on the soap dish. But then he later talks about how the appearance didn't look like something that you would get hitting your head on a soap dish. He says Sneed woke him up at 8 or 8:30 a.m. to help put plexiglass on the outside of the window room 102. He said he and Deanna went back to bed and he told Billy to wake him at noon. And again, he knows Barry's dead in room 102, but he goes back to bed and goes back to sleep. He said Billy woke him at around 1 p.m. and they got up, got dressed, and went to run some errands. They bought glasses. He bought Deanna a ring, and they got some construction material supplies at Walmart. They'd picked up blinds, air fresheners, and were getting paint when Deanna was paged by Billy. Billy told them Barry was dead, that his car had been found at the Weoki Credit Union. Glossip and Deanna, apparently, in spite of having all this shit in their car, they just grabbed the air fresheners, paid for them, and left. Now, why they're grabbing air fresheners, I don't know, except maybe they're wondering if Barry's body's going to start smelling pretty soon.
Yeah, exactly. There's a pretty clear reason why you might.
And sometimes with Glossip, what he says, he doesn't realize that he's actually given himself away with some of the things he says, but we'll get to that a little later. And the air fresheners is one of them.
Yeah, there's a pretty, not that many, I mean, a couple of uses for air fresheners.
Yeah. And so even though at this point he's not admitting to police that Sneed had told him, we know from later statements that he knows Barry's in 102, but he goes searching around the property.
Well, that's
searching dumpsters.
All these,
Cliff and Deanna.
all of these guys, they just exhibit very, very strange behavior that the only way it's explained is if they're involved.
Yeah. And I'm sure he was probably like at the table with Deanna and Cliff, like, where could he be? Oh gosh, where could he be? Why would his car be at the credit union? I don't understand. Why would he park at the credit union?
All right.
I mean, dog ate my fucking homework. Sneed disappeared right after he got back from Walmart. At least that's what he told police. Glossip implied that he knew something was wrong when he saw Sneed's head and they found Barry's car. But he, again, insists he knew nothing, had nothing to do with the murder because he was in bed with his girlfriend when Barry was killed. Well, how would he know that? Because he doesn't know anything about it. So how would he know when Barry was killed?
Exactly.
He said he had a feeling Sneed did it, but then he said he couldn't see Sneed doing it. Or that he didn't see Sneed doing it. And I don't know whether that's, I don't think he's the type to do it, or I just didn't see it. I wasn't there. He told police that Barry picked up 9 days of deposits of about $450 a day. He told them Barry collected $3,600 to $4,000 in cash deposits. He admitted seeing Sneed when they got back from Walmart and yelling to him, but claims he had to go inside and talk to Cliff Everhart. That was more important. Glossip recounts for BMO the alleged, there was apparently an issue with the owner of the Grand Continental. At some point, the corporate papers were drawn up in Glossip's name for the hotel, and Glossip's name was put on the bank accounts. And then the owner of the hotel was writing checks and allegedly forging Glossip's name. Again, given Glossip's character, I would bet that he and the owner were up in this scheme together.
All right.
But that when it looked like the shit was about to hit the fan, Glossip decided he was going to report it all as fraud.
Yeah, exactly.
But he recounts this to BMO, and he doesn't say, well, you were supposed to investigate this and you never did, and I made a complaint against you. He just reports it and says, I had to report it. It went to white collar crime, and nothing really ever came of it. He also said the Grand Continental shut down, and I'm betting that the reason, that he's one of the reasons the Grand Continental shut down, and that Everhart then brought him to Van Treese, who hired him to manage the best budget in Oklahoma City. And I also get from a couple of other statements that Glossip made to the police, I think he has a very high opinion of himself. And he's one of those manipulative people that's going to think, if he gives you a glass of water, it's like he's cut off his arm and done something so great for you. He's donated a kidney to you. And how dare you be ungrateful? Because at one point he's like, I did so much for this man, and I can't believe I'm in this position. Because he's that kind of manipulative, narcissistic, controlling personality. Glossip, whines and cries and says he makes a good living, and that he and Deanna go out and do stupid stuff like buy clothes, and she collects perfume, and that's all they do. He's like, he doesn't need Barry's money because he makes so much money on his own. He tries to say that Sneed stole pennies from a long-term resident named Big John because Big John was on vacation. There was a collection of pennies in his room. And during the vacation, Sneed came to Glossip and asked for penny rolls, and then started exchanging pennies for quarters for the vending machines. But again, you have somebody there you don't pay for their work. What do you expect them to do? And I still say, I think Glossip got a cut of them pennies. Probably for every quarter that Sneed exchanged, Glossip got a quarter in return.
Yeah, that makes sense. That, Glossip was like the godfather of the little motel, managing all the criminals.
Glossip told the detectives that Sneed had master keys to all the rooms. I think he's trying to direct them towards Sneed without actually saying he confessed to me. Now, I did make a mistake. I posted on Twitter that Glossip told police that Barry Van Treese stayed in room 102, and I was mistaken. Glossip tried, even when he's being questioned, to say that wasn't the room Barry preferred. He said Barry stayed in 108 the last time he visited the motel, and that prior to that, he'd stayed in 255 and 229. Even though everybody else said Barry liked 102 because it was a little bit nicer room. It had the waterbed, and that was easier for him on his back because he'd been in some kind of major car accident and been pretty severely injured and had long-term back problems. Glossip said there were waterbeds in 101, 102, and 125. He said that the stereo in 102 was a piece of shit that came out of the laundry room. He said there was the same stereo in room 125. So trying to make it seem like 102 wasn't a really big deal room. When detectives were saying, yeah, but there was a stereo in there. That seems like, if I owned a motel, that would be the room I would want to stay in. So Glossip's got to make it seem like, 102 wasn't a big deal. He repeated the claim about Sneed having master keys to all the rooms, implying that he wasn't supposed to have those master keys. And he also said Sneed had deadbolt keys to all the rooms. And motels, usually what happens is they have a deadbolt key that they can use to lock a guest out because the guest never gets a key to that room. You can deadbolt it when you're inside the room, but you can't deadbolt it from outside the room. Barry also said that after he came back from Tulsa, Barry had not parked out front, which was unusual. And then he did say he had a hunch Sneed did it, but didn't know for sure. And he claimed that he told Tim Brown that Justin's name was Justin Taylor, even though Brown said he denied knowing Justin's last name. And that was where he said, I'm not trying to call you a liar, but didn't I tell you, Justin Taylor as soon as you asked? And then he's like, well, maybe I didn't hear you ask for his name. He also made some statements. He knows it's pointing in his direction. He says after they found the car, he knew Justin was involved, but he didn't know Barry was actually dead. He claimed he made $750 per month from the vending machines that were his. And in another source that I read, and I don't know whether it was in the clemency packet from the state or elsewhere, but there was also apparently an issue of Glossip claiming hotel property was his own. So I'm wondering, I find it kind of unusual that you would bring a manager in and let the manager put vending machines in that he made the money from and not charge him something to have his vending machines on your property.
Yeah, exactly.
And as I understand it, usually vending machines on motel properties and school properties are owned by somebody who manages them and stocks them. And how do you make $750 a month if you have to stock the machines? Or was Barry Van Treese stocking those machines? That's kind of a troubling thing for me. But again, I think he's trying to give the police the idea that he makes this $1,500 a month and he makes $750 a month. So that's over $2,200 a month. He doesn't need to steal money from Barry Van Treese. Although if he and Deanna are spending money and not saving money and not keeping money, and I think that they were, because Glossip had to take advances that were charged against his, later payrolls. He wasn't making a lot of money, or what he was making was just never going to be enough. And he claimed that he told Brown that I thought I saw Barry, and that Brown's the only person he told that to. So then he leaves. They can't hold him. They don't have probable cause, even though, some of these statements are troubling and some of these statements don't, sound quite right. But they didn't have a confession and they didn't have any probable cause, so they couldn't arrest him. So they let him go, and he starts selling things. And he tells people he's going to move on, even though apparently to him, that doesn't mean I'm leaving Oklahoma City. It just means I'm leaving the best budget. I'm going to go find a job somewhere else. Maybe because, I've gotten my maintenance guy to kill the manager and the heat's on and I don't want to be around for it. So he's arrested and brought in. They find the $1,700, which we'll talk about the origins of that later. And so he's being questioned again by the police. And again, he's trying to say, I'm a good guy. I'm an honest guy. I'm being honest with you now. I'm going to tell you the truth. I did lie. He admits to lying all during the 8th. So where someone says, show me where he lied, look at January 8th. His entire statement was a lie. Either actual lies or lies of omission. He claimed that Deanna is the one that told him not to say anything. And if he didn't know for sure, he shouldn't say anything, which once again does not make sense. When you're talking to police about somebody that got killed, they're the people that really determine what happened. It's their job. So whatever is to help them determine what really happened. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, 100%.
And so why would your girlfriend
Definitely.
say, don't say anything to anybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
mean,
all these little details, everything taken together, his behavior, everything he reports, his lies, none of it makes sense. None of it makes sense if you're innocent.
yeah. He also tried to throw shade at Cliff Everhart by saying he thinks he had something to do with it. He admitted that he didn't tell the truth in his interview on the 8th because he didn't want to lose Deanna, which, I mean, I guess because she told him not to say anything. So if he talked to police, she was going to dump him.
Yeah, I'll totally risk going to jail, getting the death penalty for murder because I don't want to lose my girlfriend. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're gonna
And
lose
she's the
her.
love of his life. And this is what a loser. Well, he's not really a loser. This is what a narcissist that Glossip is. Every woman is the love of his life.
Yeah.
She's the one until she's not.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
She's probably gonna break up with you if you go to death row. I'm just saying.
yeah.
Unless you're that Leah girl that's married him recently.
Yeah. He denied that Barry had ever told him that he had to get any money because they're saying William Bender doesn't know you. Why is he saying these things? He's like, I don't know, but Barry never told me I had to get any money. Barry never told me, anything. He and I were going to fix up the motel. That doesn't sound like he's going to fire me if we're going to fix up the motel. It's kind of like the again, dog ate my homework. Why would Barry tell me these things if he's telling these people this? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
Well, that's because you're lying through your fucking teeth. That's why it doesn't make sense. He says that Ken, Barry's brother, told Glossip that Barry said he was a good guy. Well, maybe Barry did think you were a good guy at one time until you started robbing him blind.
Well, yeah, he had to think he was pretty good. He wouldn't have hired him to run his property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He also told police that a woman named Carol, who was apparently a Van Treese family member who had been around the hotel, was the one that told him to go get an attorney. So even this, again, Deanna twisted his arm and told him not to talk to police, or not to, at least if he talked to them, not to tell him anything of substance. And then this woman, Carol, is the one who made him go out and talk to David McKenzie. And then when he talked to David McKenzie, McKenzie said he didn't want to hear the whole truth because he didn't want to know. I dog ate my homework. So Glossip was arrested on January 9th, 1997 by the Oklahoma City Police Department. And it's hilarious. In the end of that interview, he's like, I'm not going to run. I'm not going to run. I've got nowhere to go. And interestingly enough, he says Sneed told him when he admitted to killing Barry, he said he did it because he didn't want Barry to see the rooms, because if Barry saw the rooms, he was going to get fired. And I think that that's really part of Glossip's motive. I think Glossip's motive was multiple things, but what made it crucial that Barry die on the 7th was that either he was going to call the police about the missing money, or he was going to fire Glossip, and Glossip had nowhere to go when he saw the rooms. And as the manager of the motel, the rooms are on him 100%.
Right.
Because he's the one, and the whole condition, the deplorable state of the motel, that's on Glossip. He says, I cleaned it up, I made it so nice, but it was a shithole in 1997. In January 1997. You didn't clean anything up and make anything nice. You ran off anybody that didn't want to play ball with you, maybe, but your drug dealer brother was there. That's not cleaning up a motel. He says he ran off all the prostitutes, but his current defenders claim there was a lot of prostitution activity going on at the motel. And they imply that Barry Van Treese was allowing it to go on. So they're calling you a liar, Richard. He was initially indicted as an accessory after the fact because his statement to police and his inconsistent statements to other witnesses really made it sound more like he knew about the murder and just covered it up to protect Sneed. Oh, and he, like I said, he claimed he wasn't protecting Sneed. He was protecting himself to avoid losing Deanna. But his charge was after Sneed was arrested, identified as Justin Sneed and arrested and brought in for questioning on January 14th. Then they knew that Glossip was, as they suspected, involved. Now it's interesting also, he admitted to police on the 8th that he knew things were pointing in his direction and he knew he was in it. And at one point he even said to police that he didn't go in room 102 because he didn't want his fingerprints anywhere. Now, why would an innocent person say I didn't want my fingerprints anywhere?
Exactly.
Innocent person doesn't say stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, that's, yeah. I know I keep beating a dead horse, but like innocent people don't keep, there's so many of the 100 things he says that innocent people just don't say.
Yeah. So the state filed a bill of particulars, which in Oklahoma procedure, the bill of particulars are the aggravating factors that the state is going to seek to prove to seek the death penalty. And again, like I said, he was indicted initially for accessory, but they upgraded that, amended that to first-degree murder. Initially, his first trial and direct appeal, he was represented by Wayne Fornerat at trial and G. Lynn Birch and Matthew Hare on appeal. And I think they were with the Oklahoma Indigent Defender Service. On July 31st, 1998, he was convicted and sentenced to death. His petition was in error was filed for appeal on February 1st, 1999. On October 28th, 1999, there was a destruction of evidence. A property transfer report was issued by the DA's office to the PD, noting that appeals had been exhausted. Well, we know that Sneed had pled guilty. Glossip had been convicted after trial, and his case was on appeal. So the appeals exhausted statement was wrong. And it ordered the destruction of the evidence being held by the police department, or being held by the DA's office and being transferred back to the police department. To date, nobody has identified who at the DA's actually issued or signed the order. We know who received it and processed it at the PD's office or the police department, but we don't know who was involved at the DA's office. And apparently in 1999, there was no system set up to correct a potential mistake like this and keep it from happening. So on the 10th of November, the box was marked for destruction and apparently destroyed. It contained some physical evidence. It contained some financial records. It contained the shower curtain. It contained the glass found in room 102. It contained duct tape found in room 102. I mean, some of the physical evidence. I think, though, that everything had been subjected to testing as much as possible, and nothing either exculpatory or inculpatory had been developed. I find it unlikely that Glossip was ever going to seek to test any of the evidence with DNA testing because of the potential of finding his DNA and thereby corroborating Sneed's statements. And his best argument is nothing connects me from a physical evidence standpoint. So, but that did happen. Glossip's direct appeal continued. Briefing was done. And the case was actually remanded on ineffective assistance of counsel claims, were remanded to the trial court for hearing. The judge had her hearing. She issued her findings of fact and conclusions of law. Supplemental briefing was done. And then the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals on July 17, 2001, reversed and remanded Glossip's case for a new trial based on pervasively ineffective manner in which Glossip was represented at trial, which prejudiced him. The court also found kind of indicative that the corroborating evidence of Sneed's testimony was weak. The finding of the court was that the counsel failed to effectively cross-examine or use potent impeachment evidence during Sneed's testimony, that counsel presented an ill-prepared, incomprehensible defense, and failed to review reports available to him, and failed to have his alternate suspect testify. And actually, there's an alternate suspect that wasn't Justin Sneed that Fornerat and Glossip were pointing at during his first trial. So I think Fornerat was attempting to actually say it wasn't even Justin Sneed, it was this other guy. Because that he felt like if he could get Justin Sneed's entire statement found false. Pardon? Kyle's having some technical difficulties.
Oh, sorry, I'm back now. No, I apologize.
Okay.
I thought
That's okay.
I think I was having a little bit of weird internet stuff.
Oh, okay. I thought you were asking a question. So yeah, apparently Fornerat's strategy was have Sneed's entire confession and testimony against Glossip determined to be false because somebody else killed Barry Van Treese. And they found that counsel failed to prepare for trial, and the mistakes made were not part of any trial strategy. So, and this is an example of, because one of the claims that they're alleging recently is that his second trial, the attorneys were ineffective because they didn't do all these things. But if that were true, then why wouldn't the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals have reversed that conviction as well? Because they did when Fornerat was ineffective.
Yeah.
His second trial went back to Oklahoma County. He was going to be tried by Judge Twala Mason Gray, who was the judge who conducted the hearings and was apparently the judge in that division by that point. He was represented by Silas Lyman and Wayne Woodard, which Glossip is claiming the same attorneys who represented him in his first direct appeal represented him at his second trial, and that's totally untrue. They were members of the Oklahoma Indigent Defender Service, but they were not involved in his first direct appeal. And then on direct appeal, he was represented by Janet Chesley and Kathleen Smith, again, also Oklahoma. And the Indigent Defendant Service, I think they have the trial attorneys and then they have the appellate attorneys who specialize in trial and appeal work. In January 16th of 2003, a hearing was held in the trial court, at which time Fern Smith informed the court and the defense counsel about the destruction of the evidence in that box on November 10th, 1999. There were motion hearings on June 17, 2002, June 26, 2002, and June 27, 2002. Those may have been ones to seek, it may have been to seek access to that evidence. I don't know, because the motions aren't really, it's not really clear from the docket what they were about. And those two pieces are also out of order. Sorry about that. And then on October 29th, 2003, apparently the DA's office had investigated, and Connie Smotherman, the DA who was then assigned to the case, emailed Glossop's attorneys and said, I am not aware of any policy authorizing the destruction of evidence from our office. So again, there's not a lot of information about this, but the defense was well aware of it prior to Glossop's trial, and none of the motions after, don't appear to have been any motions after 2003 seeking to, get the indictment thrown out or reduce the charge or dismiss the claims altogether based on this destruction of evidence. It's unlikely, again, that that would have been done anyway, while it could be used strategically to make the case look weak to a jury. Realistically, I don't think that Glossop's team would have wanted to test any of that evidence anyway. And anybody saying there would have been certain evidence developed from that evidence is full of crap, because that's all speculative. Because it didn't develop any evidence inculpatory toward Glossop, and it didn't really develop any evidence that was actually exculpatory to him, because the absence of his fingerprints or DNA isn't exculpatory in a situation where he arranged for someone else to commit the murder. And if you'll notice, I'm not relying on Justin Sneed's statements, besides the bare minimum of the fact that Sneed said Glossop came to him, said he has to die, and now he's dead, and they split the money that they found in the car, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But anyway, so the second trial, the bill of particulars filed to seek the death penalty again was murder for remuneration or promise of remuneration, or employing another to commit the murder for remuneration or offer of remuneration, and that the defendant will likely commit criminal acts of violence that constitute a continuing threat. Those were kind of the same bill of particulars from the first trial. The second trial, the state was represented by Connie Smotherman and Gary Ackley. Again, Glossop was represented by Lyman and Woodard. Jury selection was conducted between May 10th, 2004 and May 13th, 2004. The state's case was conducted between May 13th and June 1st, 2004. The defense presented evidence, probably not a whole lot, on June 1st, 2004. And again, because the primary evidence against Glossop was his own statements, in addition to the gaps filled in by Sneed's statement. The jury closing arguments were made, and the jury got the case at 4:55 p.m. They deliberated until 10:15 p.m. and then they came back with a first-degree malice murder conviction. The penalty phase was between June 2nd and June 3rd at 1:45 p.m. The defense put on its evidence the afternoon of June 2nd, and that was, members of Glossop's family testified. They put on any evidence that they thought would mitigate the aggravating factors to convince the jury to spare Glossop's life. And the state presented some victim impact statements, but a factor that the jury can also consider is the evidence at trial. And that can serve to show the aggravating factors, to prove the aggravating factors for a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's, I think, what the state in this particular case relied on more than anything else was the manner in which Barry Van Treese was murdered, the getting Justin Sneed to do the murder, Justin Sneed's reliance on Glossip, because Glossip admits in his January 9th statement that, Sneed never had any money, and so Glossip had to buy him food, bought him cigarettes, all these things. And I had that in my notes, and I think I forgot to type that stuff out. And it looks like we've lost Kyle. Hopefully he'll be back soon. The jury deliberated. The closing arguments were made by the state and defense on June 3rd. The jury deliberated from 1:45 to 6:30 p.m. and then came back and found Glossip, sentenced Glossip to death, or recommended that Glossip be sentenced to death. Now, there was one incident apparently at some point during the trial, and it's not really clear exactly when it was. A close family friend of Judge Gray died suddenly and probably quite unexpectedly. And after that happened, Judge Gray actually told the jury, "You'll see me get teary-eyed, but it has nothing to do with this case. It's because a family friend died, and I apologize. I'm trying to do my best to control my emotions, but it's very tough. It's very difficult." Glossip's attorneys never raised an issue. They never raised an objection. They never put it on the record that the judge was crying during any presentation of evidence or any part of the case. And they didn't complain about this display of emotion on Judge Gray's part. So after his conviction, he was formally sentenced on August 27th, 2004, and then began his appeal. And welcome back, Kyle.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think my battery died.
Oh no, on your laptop?
Yeah, I thought I had plenty of time. I had been charging it overnight. It just died.
See, I've always left my laptops plugged in. I've never operated them on a battery because even out the box, I've always found they only get like 3 or 4 hours.
Right, no warning either. It was just like done.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm done. Goodbye. All right. Well, welcome back. I went through the trial. Glossip was convicted and sentenced to death. And I mentioned there was a time during the trial when a family friend of Judge Gray died, and Gray had some difficulty controlling her emotions for a day or two after that event. She explained that to the jury and told the jury it has nothing to do with the case. And Glossip's attorneys didn't complain. They didn't request a mistrial. They didn't put anything on the record or raise any issue as to this show of emotion by the judge. So that is, and there was also during deliberations, either guilt, innocence, or death penalty, the deliberations had exceeded the time that the jurors could park wherever they were parked. And so they were taken to the parking lot to move their cars. I guess
Oh my
maybe they were
gosh, only in Oklahoma.
They were in a lot that was going to close down and lock up. And so they had to move their cars out to the street or something like that. And it actually had happened during Charles Warner's trial. The same thing had happened. So that was also an event that occurred. So he was represented by Janet Chesley and Kathleen Smith on appeal. Drew Edmondson and Seth Branham were the attorneys for the state. Initially, his first appellate request, there was some flaw or some problem. And so the initial appeal was transferred to a new 2005 appeal number. and he refiled his petitions in error and refiled his certificates of appeal. It may have been that he actually filed something out of time and was given by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals the opportunity to continue a direct appeal. So again, for a system that supposedly has it in for Glossip, he certainly is getting a second chance when there's a mistake, whether it was his own or attributable to him. So he pursued his direct appeal. He got 3 extensions of time to file his brief. On his fourth, or rather, he got 2 extensions of time. On his third request, his attorney was ordered to come in and show cause as to why she couldn't file the brief on time. He was granted a third extension of time. He applied for an evidentiary hearing on his Sixth Amendment claims related to assistance of counsel. He got his brief filed. The state was granted 2 extensions of time and then filed their brief. He was able to file a reply brief. Oral argument was set, and the case was argued in 2006. He filed a supplemental authority, and then on April 13th, 2007, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals issued its opinion. And some of the issues he raised were insufficiency of the evidence to convict because Sneed's testimony was not sufficiently corroborated, that the state presented irrelevant and highly prejudicial evidence during this first stage of trial to elicit sympathy for the victim and Sneed, that demonstrative aids were used by the state to overly emphasize portions of witness testimony, and the court erred in refusing to include those. They were posters in the court record. They argued in prosecutorial misconduct. That's Proposition 4, that the prosecutor offered arguments that misrepresented facts and misled the jury regarding the absence of Glossip's fingerprints in room 102, that only Glossip had motive, that the accessory after the fact defense raised by Glossip was baseless, that there was improper character evidence used to elicit sympathy for the victim and Sneed, that only the Oklahoma City motel had shortages or had financial trouble, and only Glossip was going to be fired, and implied additional evidence implicating Glossip existed during the testimony of Caleb Pursley, and also that the prosecutor misstated the law and injected personal opinion during the penalty phase. Proposition 5, he argued that his counsel was ineffective for failing to use Sneed's interrogation during cross-examination of Sneed and Inspector Bemo, that readily available evidence was not used on cross-examination of Sneed, that financial records were not used on cross-examination to impeach Donna Van Treese, that his attorneys failed to object to the evidence admitted in Proposition 2, and that his defense failed to object to the prosecutorial misconduct of Proposition 4. And then finally, not finally, Sneed's self-serving testimony was insufficient to support the murder for remuneration aggravator, that jury instructions defining the jury's roles were flawed, that there was improper victim impact evidence admitted when Barry's widow and daughters, or one daughter, was permitted to read statements from other family members, that the trial court abused its discretion in removing jurors for cause and used the wrong method to determine whether jurors could impose the death penalty by using incorrect language in questioning the jurors, and that the trial court also abused its discretion when it removed a juror serving a deferred sentence after a criminal conviction. And then the final proposition was the challenge to the use of an in-life photograph of Barry Van Treese, arguing that statute, that Oklahoma statute, was unconstitutional, and the relevance of the photograph was outweighed by its danger of harm. The findings of the court were pretty strong on the evidence or the sufficiency of the evidence claim. They found that there was both direct and circumstantial evidence supporting Glossop's conviction. The most compelling corroboration of Sneed's testimony that it found was the money in Glossop's possession at the time of his arrest. There was no evidence presented by Glossop that Sneed had any independent knowledge of the money under Barry's car seat. And remember, Sneed moved the car to the credit union, took the money from under the seat, brought it back to Glossop, and Glossop split it between them. That's Sneed's story. Again, I didn't rely a lot on that because Glossop dug his own hole or dug his own grave, but that is what Sneed said. And again, they never presented any evidence that Sneed knew about the money. And if Sneed knew about the money and committed the murder, why would he take it back to Glossop and split it with him? Dog ate my homework. It makes no sense for Sneed to do that. He would have just said, well, the money wasn't there. I don't know where it was.
Yeah, exactly.
And neither one of the morons knew about the $23,000 in the trunk of Van Treese's car. Because apparently, and this was addressed at trial, even though they will claim that nobody knows about that money or why that was there. Van Treese apparently kept cash to deal with paying bills and paying expenses for the motels and their personal home expenses. So he kept that money in the car, and it was sorted and organized for, paying motel bills, paying home bills, etc. Donna Van Treese testified to all that at the trial. But apparently Glossop didn't know that there was $23,000, because if Glossop had known, he would have told Sneed to take that money too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then maybe he
That would have
would
been
have
more
left
than
town.
that would have been at least a year of his salary, right?
Yeah, probably about. Glossop's action after the murder also shed light on his guilt. The state presented sufficient evidence to show that Glossop feared that he was going to be fired as manager because the motel accounts had shortages during the end of 1996. Everhart had told Barry that he thought Glossop was pocketing a couple hundred extra every week during the last quarter of 1996. Billy Hooper shared her concerns about the motel with Barry, who told her that he knew he had to take care of things. The condition of the motel at the time of Barry's death was deplorable. Only half of the rooms were habitable. The entire motel was filthy. Glossop was a person responsible for the day-to-day operations of the motel, and he knew that he would be blamed for the motel's condition. His motive, along with evidence that he actively concealed Barry's body from discovery, as well as his plans to move on, connect him with the commission of this crime, according to the appellate court. Evidence that a defendant attempted to conceal a crime and evidence of attempted flight support an inference of consciousness of guilt, either of which can corroborate an accomplice's testimony. We've also got his first, statement to police where he lied and covered up what he knew, because Sneed told him at 5 o'clock in the morning that he killed Barry. The state also presented enormous amount of evidence that Glossop concealed Barry's body from investigators all day long, and he lied about the broken window. He admitting that knowing that Sneed killed Barry in room 102, he knew about the broken glass. However, he told no one that he thought Sneed was involved in the murder until after he was taken into custody after Barry's body was found. He intentionally lied by telling people that Barry had left early that morning to get supplies. In fact, Barry was killed hours before Glossop had claimed to have seen him that morning. Glossop's stories about when he last saw Barry were also inconsistent. He first said he saw him at 7 a.m. Later, he said he saw him at 4:30 a.m. Finally, he said he last saw him at 8 p.m. the night before Barry's death, and he denied making other statements regarding the time he last saw Barry. Glossop also intentionally steered everyone away from room 102. He told Billy Hooper that Barry left to get materials and that Barry stayed in room 108 the night before. He told Jackie Williams, a housekeeper, not to clean any downstairs room, which included room 102. He said that he and Sneed would clean the downstairs rooms. He told a number of people that 2 drunken cowboys broke the window, and he tried to implicate a person who was observed at the nearby Sinclair station as one of those cowboys. He told Everhart that he would search the rooms for Barry, and then he told Sneed to search the rooms. No other person searched the rooms until 17 hours after the murder, when Barry's body was discovered. The next day, Glossip began selling all of his belongings before he admitted that he actively concealed Barry's body. He told Everhart he was going to be moving on. He failed to show up for an appointment with investigators, so the police had to take him in custody for the second interview, where he admitted to actively concealing Barry's body. He said he lied about Sneed, telling him about killing Barry, not to protect Sneed, but he felt like he was involved in it. Now, Glossip had argued on appeal that all that evidence proved at best that he was an accessory after the fact. But despite that claim, a defendant's actions after a crime can prove him guilty of the offense. Evidence showing consciousness of guilt has been used many times. Here, all of the evidence taken together amounts to sufficient evidence, first, to corroborate Sneed's story about Glossip's involvement in the murder, and second, the evidence sufficiently ties Glossip to the commission of the offense so that the conviction is supported. And it's important to note, under these circumstances, Glossip did not have to wield the bat. Glossip did not have to be in the room. Glossip did not have to physically harm or kill Barry Van Treese. He directed Sneed to do it. He offered Sneed money in order to do it. And ultimately, he paid Sneed with Barry's own money, which he kept half of. Because when they split that money from under the car seat, that was Sneed's payment. And anybody here, well, it was less than, he offered him $7,000, he offered $10,000. It doesn't matter. If Sneed didn't want to lie and say there was no money under the seat to get the whole $4,000, that's on Sneed. If he's getting less than Glossip promised him, that's on Sneed.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's just, that's the way it goes. And it's kind of like in the Dahlia Dippolito case, she offered initially to have the hitman kill Mike Dippolito at the bank and take $10,000 from him to pay for the homicide. So no, she didn't give the hitman any money, but the hitman had the promise of $10,000 on Mike Dippolito's dead body,
Right,
that he could take for payment.
yeah.
So that's called promise of payment. The court went on, and in Proposition 2, they found that Glossip's counsel failed to object to much of the evidence complained of. Therefore, they reviewed for plain error and found none. The testimony about Barry and the family tragedies that befell the Van Treeses was relevant to show why Donna became concerned about Barry on January 7th and why he was not involved in the day-to-day operation of the motel, and how the motel could slip into the state of disrepair that existed on January 7th, 1997. Also, evidence that Barry was a ham radio operator was relevant because it was a ham radio operator's personalized license plate that identified his car. As to Proposition 3, the court, in reviewing the entire record, could not say that the posters affected the outcome of the trial. Both sides used poster, and they found any error to be harmless. Now, in the concurring and dissenting opinions, some of the judges weren't real happy with the trial judge's refusal to make the posters a part of the court record. But they couldn't really argue with the main outcome, that the posters caused no harm, because in reality, the defense didn't object to the use of the posters, and they utilized posters themselves. They also never claimed that any of the statements on the posters were false. They merely claimed that the posters were around and that it enabled witnesses to tailor their testimony, or it constituted constant argument before the jury. Neither of which were ever proven by, say, an affidavit from a juror that said, yeah, those posters, I used those, I looked at those the whole trial. As to 4, they also found the prosecutorial misconduct allegations were not preserved, so their review was for plain error. Again, they found as to the first allegation, and I'm gonna look back and see what that was. On 4A, about the absence of fingerprints in room 102, that as a manager of the motel and a person who was responsible for repairs in every room, it was suspicious that none of Glossop's fingerprints were found in the room. That was a fair inference from the evidence. The prosecutor was not arguing that Glossop had selectively removed fingerprints after the crime, but was arguing that the absence of his fingerprints in the room, even ones that might have been left under innocent circumstances, was unusual, and they found no plain error. The complaints regarding their argument as to Glossop's motive, the state was arguing that Sneed had no reason to kill Barry other than the offer of money from Glossop. Again, that was a fair inference from the evidence, because Glossop presented no evidence that Sneed had an independent motive or independent knowledge of the money under the seat of the car, in the car. So they found no plain error.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no reason for Sneed to have killed him.
Yeah. As to the complaints regarding the comments on the accessory after the fact defense raised by Glossop, or arguments made by Glossop, the court found that while the state initially charged Glossop with accessory to the murder and Sneed with murder, the state dismissed the accessory information and added Glossop as co-defendant with Sneed to the murder information. That was not plain error, and the argument based on that was not plain error. The issue as to objection to the evidence had been, I'm sorry. Okay. D was the improper character evidence, and that was resolved with Proposition 2, as far as what was admitted about Barry Van Treese. The fact that the Van Treeses discussed firing both managers at Oklahoma City and Tulsa was not in conflict with the fact that they were going to fire Glossop first, move Bender to Oklahoma City, and then take Glossop's place while managers were sought for both motels. And so they found his complaints about the prosecutorial comments about the condition of the Oklahoma City motel had no merit. The complaint of questioning of Kayla Pursley in the next allegation was to rebut the defense's cross-examination, where counsel brought up the fact that she testified to things not in the police report because she remembered these things after she talked to police. Prosecutor was merely attempting to show that Pursley was testifying from her memory and not from the police report. The fact that the jury was deprived of this evidence due to lack of memory was not indicative of more evidence damaging to Glossop. The claim does not rise to the level of plain error. And then finally, the prosecutor's arguments at the penalty phase were proper comments on the evidence in order to show that based on the circumstances of the crime, Glossop was a continuing threat to society. Obviously, the jury did not accept the prosecutor's argument because they did not find that Glossop was a continuing threat. The ineffective assistance of counsel claims, basically, Glossop has to show that the attorney's performance was deficient and it prejudiced Glossop.
Isn't that basically automatic? Like, doesn't every defendant
Yeah,
file
every
ineffective? Because if you lost, it's ineffective counsel.
correct. And that's what Glossop's arguing, and that's common. I mean, in the West Memphis 3 case, I saw people on the supporter side say the evidence was so weak that they had to be ineffective in order to lose.
Yeah. If you lose here, it's bad count.
But in reality, in the court, you have to prove both deficient performance and prejudice by that performance, because sometimes a mistake can be a part of valid trial strategy, like calling a witness that ends up saying things that are damaging on cross-examination. But you needed to call that witness to get your case or your evidence in on direct. The court went on to say that there's a strong presumption that counsel's conduct falls within the wide range of reasonable professional conduct, and an appellant must overcome that presumption that under the circumstances, counsel's conduct constituted trial strategy. To establish prejudice, Glossop must show that there's a reasonable probability that but for counsel's unprofessional errors, the result of the proceeding would have been different. The court's examination of Glossop's claim in the context of the entire trial record led them to rule that any misconduct that might have occurred did not affect the outcome of the case. So there could be no ineffective assistance counsel. And basically they reviewed the entire record, and even if the attorney didn't object to the prosecutorial misconduct, sometimes there are valid reasons not to object. You don't want to call attention to something, so you don't make it look like a bigger deal to the jury. So them failing to object to some of the prosecutor's comment, and sometimes, trial is, you got to be fast on your feet. And sometimes if you're not quite fast enough, you miss your chance to lodge an objection. Or it's objectionable, but you don't know exactly how. And in order to prevail on the objection, you have to tell the judge why. And so you have to just let it go. But and sometimes you'll lodge an objection and you'll cite a reason and you lose. And then later on you think, oh, well, I should have said this. But you can't re-argue it. The moment has passed. In Proposition 6, the court found Glossop's argument that Sneed murdered Barry so that he could steal money from his car was flawed, because no murder needed to occur for Sneed to take money from Barry's car. There was sufficient evidence presented that Glossop promised to pay Sneed to kill Barry. Because Glossop knew there would be money under the seat, a simple burglary of the automobile would have resulted in the fruits of the supposed desire. The fact is that Glossop was not after money. He wanted Barry dead and was willing to pay Sneed to do the dirty work. He knew that Sneed would do it for the mere promise of a large payoff, and there was no evidence that Sneed had any independent knowledge of this money. And to this day, Glossop has failed to ever produce any evidence or testimony that Sneed knew there was money under the seat of Barry Van Treese's car. His attorneys have presented some speculation, and they've declared this, but they've never presented any independent evidence that anybody but Glossop would know there was money under the car. And the reason Glossop would know, as he told police, when Barry would come and collect money, Glossop would walk him to the car. And Glossop would watch him leave to make sure nothing happened. So Glossop would have observed him placing the money under the seat of the car. Simple. Sneed was never involved in that process. And there's no evidence that Sneed was involved in that process. As to the allegations regarding jury instructions, The trial court gave the uniform instructions on mitigating evidence, as well as others. And so the court chose not to revisit the issue because they've analyzed these instructions and determined their appropriateness, and they're not going to go back and reanalyze that complaint. As to the victim impact evidence, the trial counsel did object to the evidence in pretrial motions and hearings. During the second stage, an in-camera hearing was held, and the parties went through the statements, and defense counsel made objections to some of the language, and that was redacted by the trial court. However, counsel specifically stated that he had no objection to the two witnesses, Donna and her daughter Barry, reading the statements of the remaining immediate family members. Therefore, any claim regarding the method of victim impact evidence presented is waived, except that error, which is plain error. And they found that Glossip was not harmed by the state's utilization of two family members to read the statement of 5 other family members. And the court was not going to second guess trial counsel's sound trial strategy and found no plain error. As to the jurors being struck by the court, 2 were unable to consider the death penalty as a punishment. The Glossip's trial attorneys did not object to their removal, and the law does not require, due process does not require that their inability to consider the death penalty be established on the record with some formula that can be looked at later on. The first juror was unequivocal that she could not oppose the death penalty. The second expressed concern, vacillated back and forth, but ultimately stated that she could not consider the death penalty equally with the 2 life in prison options, life and life without parole. Based on the entire voir dire, the court did not abuse its discretion in removing these 2 jurors. It also did not abuse its discretion in removing a prospective juror serving a deferred criminal sentence. And even the juror felt that she was not the right person for a criminal jury. So once again, Glossip's raising a complaint about something that has no merit. And most of this had no merit, but it was raised and it was argued, and the court ultimately determined that it had no merit. That's what appellate courts do. Glossip bears a burden of proving allegations regarding constitutionality of the victim, the photograph statute. And the court found no abuse of discretion in admitting a single in-life photo of Barry. And the court again declined to overturn its prior rulings upholding that statute. The court also conducted a mandatory sentence review and found that there was sufficient evidence to support the finding of the statutory aggravating circumstance of murder for remuneration. After reviewing the entire record, they found the sentence of death was not imposed because of any arbitrary factor, passion, or prejudice. Glossip presented mitigating evidence, which was summarized and listed in an instruction to the jury, and it included his lack of prior criminal activity, his age of 41 years, his emotional and family history, that he had been incarcerated since his arrest and had not posed a threat to other inmates or detention staff, that he was amenable to a prison setting and would pose little risk in such structured setting, that he had family who loved him and valued his life, that he had a limited education and did not graduate from high school, that he had average intelligence or above and received a GED, that after leaving school, he had been continuously gainfully employed from the age of 16 to his arrest on January 9th, 1997, that he could contribute to prison society and be an assistance to others, that he had no history of aggression prior to his arrest. And I kind of wonder whether He actually just had never gotten caught or reported, that he was not present when Barry Van Treese was killed, and they had no significant drug or alcohol abuse history. In addition, the trial court instructed that the jury could decide that other mitigating circumstances exist, and they could consider them as well. So honestly, they said the jury's verdict was not born under the influence of passion, prejudice, or any other arbitrary factor, and the evidence supported the jury's findings of the aggravating circumstances under Oklahoma statute. Glossip's convictions and sentences should be affirmed. They found no error warranting reversal of his conviction or his sentence of death for first-degree murder. The concurrence, again, there were two concurrences. The second one concurred in the result, but objected to the citation of case law from other states regarding the trial court's refusal to preserve the demonstrative exhibits. The dissent strongly disagreed with the majority's opinion of challenge to accomplice corroboration evidence, and on 3, the trial court's decision over defense objection to allow the court, the DA, to post summaries of witness testimony throughout the courtroom and leave the exhibits visible to juror and later witnesses. That dissenter also performed an analysis of the money possessed by Glossip on January 9th, 1997, when he was arrested. And this is interesting because it found that $1,200 that Glossip possessed could not be accounted for. It found that he received on January 6th his paycheck in the amount of $429.33. They cashed the check, paid a 10% fee on January 7th. That would have left $386.40. They went shopping and spent $172 on a pair of glasses, $107.73 on an engagement ring, and $45 at Walmart. These purchases would have left Glossip with only $61.67 from his paycheck. It can be reasonably inferred from the evidence that Glossip was very low on cash before being paid, because earlier in the day on January 6th, he took a $20 advance from the hotel against the paycheck he was about to receive to get through the day. In addition, Glossip's girlfriend told an investigator that they lived paycheck to paycheck and that she did not think Glossip was able to save any money. The state also had presented evidence at trial that Barry Van Treese would have had $3,500 to $4,000 in cash in his possession based on hotel receipts. Pardon that, that's an alarm on my phone going off, and it's on the other side of the room. So it's going to just keep going off.
I can't even hear it.
Okay,
I didn't even
good.
hear it. It's probably me, my deafness. I didn't even hear anything.
Anybody that's hearing the Imperial March, that's
Yeah, if
why.
anybody's hearing that, you have better hearing than me.
Yeah. Justin Sneed testified that the envelope he found under the front seat of Van Treese's car, where Glossip told him to look, contained approximately $4,000 in cash, which Glossip split evenly between himself and Sneed. When Sneed was arrested, he had no regular source of income. He was apprehended a week later, and he had $1,680 in cash in a drawer in a Crown Royal bag in the apartment where he was staying. So that's interesting. Now, I think that may have been in response to an allegation by Glossip in his appellate brief that he took advances to save money so that Deanna wouldn't know about it. And basically, the argument was he would take these advances and he would squirrel that money away. He would pay the advances back when he got paid, and then Deanna would only have the reduced paycheck to spend. That doesn't make a damn bit of sense. Because if you're going to save money, you don't borrow money to save money. You don't go out and take out a loan and put it in a savings account.
Yeah, exactly.
You borrow it to pay a bill, to catch up on bills, to buy a car, to buy a house. You know, that's not the way finance works. Glossip's never presented any evidence that supports that argument. That was just the one his attorneys on direct appeal came up with. On May 3rd, 2007, Glossip filed a petition for rehearing. And let me pause it because this is driving me crazy. I'm going to pause the. All right, and we are back. Thank you for your patience. I apologize for that for anyone that heard the Imperial March. And the funny thing about Samsung phones, even if you mute them for these alarms, they unmute themselves. I don't know if you knew that about a Samsung phone. So,
Oh, yeah, I have one for work. I live with it all the time.
And I thought I had canceled the alarms for today because my phone was on the charger on the other side of the room, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to stop the alarms when they went off. But apparently I missed one. So Glossip did file for rehearing and a motion to stay the mandate. That was denied. The mandate issued on June 1st, 2007. He was granted an extension of time to file a writ at the United States Supreme Court, which he did on November 6, 2007. That writ was denied on January 28, 2008, at which time his conviction and sentence became final. He went on to, state post-conviction. He was represented by Wendy Renee Thomas Hobbs, and the Oklahoma City District Attorney and Attorney General pursued the state post-conviction or defended the conviction on state post-conviction. That is also before the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. The procedure in Oklahoma is a little bit different. They decide post-conviction. If a hearing is required, they'll send it back to the trial court for the hearing. The trial court will issue findings of fact and conclusions of law, but then it goes back to the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, and they make the ultimate decision. He filed a motion under seal on February 16, 2005. I don't know what it was. It may have been something to do with compensation because he's had indigent defense attorneys, and his attorneys have been compensated either through the state court system or the federal court system during all his post-conviction claims. Or it may have been a motion for recusal. So, because there was an order entered on February 25th dismissing a motion for recusal of Steve Lyle, I guess on the Court of Criminal Appeals. I don't know why, because he filed it under seal. And I think he ended up recusing himself. There was an application to toll the time for briefing, which was granted. Glossip made a second request for extension of time, and that was granted. Once again, by the third request, the counsel was ordered to appear and show cause on October 25th, 2006 at 9 a.m. Why the application for post-conviction couldn't have been filed by the 20th, or if it wasn't filed by the 20th. But Glossip filed his application by the 20th. He also filed a request to conduct discovery. And then the state was ordered to respond. It also requested one extension of time, which was granted, and filed its response on June 11th, 2007. The opinion was issued on October 6th, December 6th, 2007, in which post-conviction relief was denied and the request for an evidentiary hearing and discovery were denied. Glossip's issues raised dealt with ineffective appellate counsel and ineffectiveness of appellate counsel because they failed to raise issues on direct appeal and failed to fully develop the issues that they raised. He also filed a prosecutorial misconduct, which he kind of re-argued a little bit what was filed at the direct appeal level and what he pursued in post-conviction. He also filed an ineffective assistance of counsel claim as to failure to investigate Sneed because there was a pretrial evaluation of Sneed that showed he served time for a burglary and a bomb threat. And somehow this showed that Sneed was not the controllable person that the court painted him, or that the prosecutor painted him out to be. And they failed to use that evaluation to show that he was not subservient to Glossip. They also filed ineffective assistance due to counsel's failure to argue judicial bias when the judge openly cried during part of the trial and denied Glossip a fair trial, that the court failed to keep the jury sequestered and jurors were allowed to move their car during deliberations, and that all of those cumulative errors warrant a new trial. The findings were that as to Proposition 1, the counsel's argument on direct appeal did not fall below reasonable conduct, and Glossip's claim was barred by res judicata because he'd argued that on direct appeal and it had been decided. That found Proposition 2 was claimed to merely expand the direct appeal claim, and that counsel was not ineffective and the evidence would not have changed the outcome of Glossip's trial. They found the claim was not raised on direct appeal and the issue was not preserved at trial. Counsel did not move for a mistrial or seek recusal of the judge. Glossip had presented no evidence that overcame the presumption of judicial impartiality, and further could not show ineffective assistance for failure to raise the issue. Glossip failed to present anything from trial counsel to indicate whether or not he knew about the practice of having jurors move their vehicles or whether he was given an opportunity to object to the practice. Jurors were accompanied by court officers and did not have inappropriate communications. Absent an affidavit from Glossip's counsel, the proposition must fail. And then finally, 5, previous counsel was not ineffective and there was no cumulative error to consider. Then he moves on to federal habeas, and we're getting close to the end, people. I know we're probably all tired, and poor Kyle doesn't know as much and is just taking all in, aren't you, Kyle?
Yes, I'm just
Because
trying
I'm
to.
just sitting
there's
here
a
reading
lot.
from my.
No, it's a lot. I mean, there's so much in this case.
Yeah. Well,
It's like
hopefully,
it's a pretty obvious case, but like a lot of judicial paperwork.
yeah. And I think it's important, and that's why I'm kind of in this case, I really wanted to look at what he's raised before and how it was decided, because next week when we talk about the 2015 subsequent post-conviction, the Reed Smith report, the claims by Don Knight to the district attorney, and the claims by McDougal and his little buddies. I think it's really important that we look at what he's raised before and how that played out, because while some of the stuff is just thought of by these advocates, it's not new.
Right.
And you can find it in Glossip statements to police. You can find it in statements made by other people about what Glossip told them. And you can find it in these prior appeals. So I think it's really important in this particular case to kind of look at everything he's raised and everything he said was wrong with his trial. He raised multiple grounds for relief, including sufficiency of the evidence at guilt stage, evidentiary errors that occurred at his trial, a claim regarding trial error because of the posters, prosecutorial misconduct, first stage and second stage comments, ineffective assistance of counsel, including failure to introduce Sneed's interrogation video, failure to impeach witnesses with the fact that Tulsa hotel experienced shortages, failure to impeach Billy Hooper regarding her error about motel rentals. She was apparently saying that he was renting rooms off the books and there was paperwork that showed that that couldn't have happened, or, you know, something really kind of bizarre. Failure to object to irrelevant prejudicial evidence, failure to object to prosecutorial misconduct, a claim about sufficiency of the evidence in the penalty stage, claim about jury instructions in the second stage. And in Oklahoma, it's first stage is guilt, second stage is penalty. They're kind of used interchangeably, so I will use them interchangeably. He raised a claim regarding the victim impact testimony. He raised a claim regarding the dismissal of the 3 jurors. He raised a claim regarding the omission of Barry's photograph. He raised an ineffective assistance of counsel claim on failure to investigate and judicial bias. And then, of course, the cumulative error. A second motion for discovery. He filed a motion to discovery, which was pretty quickly denied. He filed a second motion for discovery on November 3rd, 2008, and that was responded to on the 26th. On May 26, 2010, which is kind of a almost 2-year, 18-month delay, the court granted the discovery request as to count 3, the posters displayed at trial. And it's interesting because while they nobody could put their hands on the posters in the state appellate process, and I don't think he even raised the poster issue in state post-conviction. By the time of the federal habeas claim, the state actually had the actual posters. And so they conducted the discovery, and then the parties filed supplemental briefing, and then the state actually located the posters and filed a motion to supplement the record and filed the posters into the record, which is pretty interesting. Glossip opposed that. He didn't want that. And during this process, his attorneys were being paid under the federal system. So Oklahoma must be one of the states that that has compensation for post-conviction counsel on federal habeas, because there are on the docket there are applications and orders for payment to Glossip's attorney. And I'm not, I don't mean that to disparage the attorneys. They deserve to get paid for what they do. So, but a lot of times it's implied that they're not getting paid, and so they're not doing the job that they should be doing. And in this particular case, I think that they were being paid and they were doing the best job they could for Glossip. But again, the underpinning of his conviction are his own words and his own statements. Even an interview with police that an attorney told him not to give, and tried to tell police, hey, look, I'm representing him. He doesn't want to talk to you. And Glossip's like, he ain't representing me. He's not my attorney. No, I want to talk to you. And I think that's because Glossip's manipulative. And so he thinks he can talk his way out of anything. And he's probably gotten as far as he has without a criminal record because he is, for the most part, able to talk his way out of trouble. And when that doesn't work, he's able to just walk away and move on and get away from it. So The record was supplemented on August 31st, on September 28th. But the supplemented record was submitted to the court prior to that, so the court had time to look at it. The motion to supplement was granted. Glossop's motion for evidentiary hearings on claims 3, 5, 6, and 7 was denied because the claims could be resolved based on the existing record, which is the standard in federal court. After AEDPA, you have to develop your record in the state court proceedings. You cannot lay behind a log and then go to federal court and say, oh, wait, we have to develop this. Send us back to state court to do it. Or let us do it in federal court. No. Federal court is not meant to make independent findings. Federal court makes findings based on the state court record. And there are very few exceptions, unless it's something that was hidden from you, like a Brady violation or something along those lines, then you may get a hearing in federal court, or the federal court, like they did with Rodney Reed, they may actually send you back to state court to have hearings and develop the record there. On the sufficiency of the evidence, the court's findings, he denied relief on the 28th of September 2010, and he found that he could not weigh conflicting evidence or consider witness credibility. And this is something we need to remember, because every article, every press conference, every word in the Reed-Smith report talks about witness credibility and weighing conflicting evidence. That's not for the courts, either state or federal, to do. Weighing conflicting evidence is for the jury to do. And once they've done it, generally the courts respect their decision. They also don't consider witness credibility. Again, the jury does that. The jury determines who's credible and who's not, and the courts respect that decision, absent some proof that witnesses are not credible. And it takes a lot to present evidence that will have a court say a witness was not credible. And usually it involves the witness having to come forward and say, I lied. And even then, sometimes courts don't believe it, because you'll see that they're put under pressure by Innocence Project and investigators, and they'll finally cave and say what they want to hear in order to get them to stop. Kind of like what they're allegedly doing with police. The court also found that the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals factual determinations were all reasonable. Because Oklahoma law does not require independent corroboration of an accomplice's testimony, as asserted by Glossip, his claim failed. The court further found there was no constitutional requirement that accomplice testimony be independently corroborated, and ruled that the OCCA sufficiency of the evidence analysis of Glossop's claims was in line with AEDPA's standard of review. As to the evidentiary errors cited by Glossip, he failed to show that the OCCA's decision was unreasonable and his due process rights were not violated. Or he failed to show that his due process rights were violated.
Lisa's, I mean, a lot of these just kind of the standard objections that the convicted make. I mean, how much of these are kind of specific to this case, and how much of these that you're going to see these types of appeals made in 80% of the convictions?
I think you're going to see these types, arguments are going to be a little different and specifics are going to be a little different. But I think for the most part, they're going to go to federal court and they're going to say all the witnesses offered by the state were lying. and the prosecutors were lying, and everybody was lying. And the only person telling you the truth, Your Honor, is my client.
Yeah.
You know, he's the only he's the one sitting on death row, but
Yeah,
he's
because
the
it seems
only
like on all
one
these
that's being
appeals, it's
totally
like my
honest.
counsel didn't do a good job. Everybody's lying. Somebody filed some paperwork wrong. Let me off.
Yeah. But that is, you know, and again, they talked about, you know, basically on sufficiency of the evidence. They kind of said, well, you know, Glossip had other sources for money, and he made more money selling his belongings, even though what he told, what he accounted for at the time was not what he's trying to say now. And a lot of times it is the accused stories change. And then they cite anything that doesn't, you know, that doesn't fit, or they kind of say, like in Glossip's case, they say he's in prison based entirely on the word of Justin Sneed, when in reality he's in prison based on his own words. And the fact that they showed him hiding a murder for 17 hours. So, as to the claim made about the posters, the court found that because Glossip did not contend that any of the statements on the posters were inaccurate, any error did not have a substantial and injurious effect on or influence the jury verdict. As to prosecutors' comments, it's kind of weird because later on in the opinion, he seems to say there may be some merit to some of the prosecutorial misconduct claims, but they didn't affect the fairness of Glossip's trial. But in his actual prosecutorial misconduct findings, he doesn't say that. He says the statements regarding the absence of Glossip's fingerprints were reasonable inference based on evidence, as were statements regarding Glossip's motive. While he was initially arrested as an accessory, charging decisions are discretionary, and the evidence supported his conviction as a principal of the murder. The comments regarding the lesser included offense claim asserted by Glossip did not alter the fundamental fairness of the trial. The rejection of Glossip's claims regarding victim impact evidence were not unreasonable. The prosecutor's statements during redirect of Kayla Pursley regarding statements in police reports was fair in light of Glossip's counsel's assertion during his cross-examination of Pursley. As to the second stage, and there was one where the prosecutor took, I think, a picture of Barry Van Treese, and kind of threw it onto the defense table and was like, I put the blood here. And that was kind of arguing because Glossip is the one who orchestrated the murder. He is the one who's more morally culpable, if not legally liable, than Sneed. And that's, you know, maybe it was a little bit too dramatic. Maybe it kind of crossed the line. And I think there was an objection that was sustained. But it still, you know, was kind of a fair commentary on the evidence. And the judge found that the OCCA's analysis of his claims was not contrary to or an unreasonable application of Supreme Court precedent, or based on an unreasonable determination of the facts. And his cumulative error claim was rejected because the errors did not deprive him of a fair trial. As for ineffective assistance, the decision not to introduce Sneed's video was reasonable trial strategy, as the videotape would have shown the jury Sneed's statement that Glossip masterminded the murder. Regarding the failure to show shortage at the Tulsa motel, Glossip failed to show that counsel's performance was deficient. The state's proffer of testimony from Donna Van Treese would have diminished any impact from the Tulsa records. Counsel's failure to impeach Billy Hooper caused no material prejudice, given the testimony from other witnesses. And again, I think Billy Hooper may have been mistaken, but a mistake is not always a lie. So she may have been mistaken, but that didn't affect the outcome of the trial. And it didn't prejudice Glossip because other witnesses testified similar to Billy Hooper. They also found that the OCCA reasonably applied Strickland in evaluating his ineffective assistance claims related to counsel's failure to object to irrelevant prejudicial evidence and the claimed prosecutorial misconduct. The sufficiency of the evidence at the penalty stage, the judge found that a rational trier of fact could have found that Sneed was telling the truth and that Glossip employed him to commit the murder for payment or the promise of payment. The OCCA's decision was reasonable. And again, Glossip took the money brought to him by Sneed, split it between them, and gave half of it to Sneed. That would be payment for Barry Van Treese's murder. It wasn't what Justin Sneed expected, but Justin chose not to argue. And then the findings of the federal court basically found that Glossip really didn't prove any of the errors that he complained of deprived him of a fair and impartial jury. And he didn't identify any Supreme Court or federal appellate decisions that warranted that he be granted relief.
Well, that's always the key, right? I mean, no trial is going to be perfect, but the question is, was there an error that actually resulted in a,
Right.
biased jury versus just an error that's just going to happen, human nature.
Yeah. And an error that isn't as much as you're making it out to be. The court found on the failure to investigate claim, found that Glossip had failed to demonstrate a reasonable probability of a different outcome had the report from Sneed's 1997 psychiatric evaluation been used to cross-examine Sneed. Information about Sneed's prior crimes and whether they were committed alone, with someone else, or influenced by someone else was totally absent from that report, which failed to provide any insight into Sneed's prior crimes. Glossip made no showing that he was prejudiced by counsel's failure to utilize this report. And I think it's also important to note that whether that report would have been admissible or not is really a question for the trial court. It may not have even been admissible under any circumstance because Sneed's not on trial and Sneed's mental condition is not at issue. It would be irrelevant and it would be hearsay. And they might have been able to use statements Sneed made in it to impeach him. But again, that depends on if Sneed denies making the statements or denies having been examined. So there are a lot of moving parts to getting a witness's psychiatric evaluation admitted in a criminal trial against a co-defendant when that witness is a cooperating witness. And it may not have changed the outcome of the trial, because if Sneed said, well, yeah, I made the bomb threat because my friend thought it would be funny and he gave me the phone, or I committed the burglary with my stepbrother because we needed money for drugs and he knew these people would be out of town. I mean, I'm speculating as to what might have happened, but the report doesn't say whether Sneed committed these crimes alone or with someone else, or whether my stepbrother brought me to the house and pointed it out and told me to go in and take the TV. And if Sneed had testified to that, because it's absent from the report, the defense attorney has just corroborated the state's case by having Sneed say, yeah, my brother got me to burglarize a house. My brother got me to call in a bomb threat. The court finally, on the judicial bias allegation as to Judge Gray crying, found that Glossop's vague assertions were inadequate. He failed to make specific allegations of actual bias by the judge or the appearance of bias. Counsel was not ineffective for failing to raise the issue, either judicial or juror at trial or on appeal. And the court found that actually what Glossop described would lead more to juror bias than judicial bias. The jurors observing the judge crying could have biased them against Glossop, in other words. And on the cumulative error claim, Glossop failed to specify the claimed errors based on the record as a whole. The cumulative effect of the prosecutor's errors when combined with the court's erroneous evidentiary ruling regarding the posters is not such that errors can no longer be determined to be harmless. So he pretty much denied Glossop's claims. He did grant a certificate of appealability on the first-degree murder in ground 1, sufficiency of the evidence. Ground 3, the posters. Ground 4, the failure to object to prosecutorial misconduct. Ground 5, failure to introduce the videotape. And ground 6, the murder for remuneration aggravator. The case went before the 10th Circuit Court of Appeal by notice of appeal filed on October 20th, 2010. And the panel for that case was current Supreme Court Judge Gorsuch, Circuit Judges Murphy and O'Brien. Glossop filed a motion to appoint Kathleen Lloyd with Mark Henriksen and Lenita Henriksen, who had been appointed to represent him in the underlying district court case. Oral argument was initially set on April 23rd, 2012 for June 27th, 2012, but Glossop filed a motion to enlarge time and oral argument was rescheduled to July 10th, 2012. The case was argued, briefing was filed, and I don't have all those dates. The case was argued by Kathleen Lord and Seth Branham for the state. The decision was authored by Circuit Judge Murphy. They affirmed the district court's denial of relief. A request for rehearing was filed by Glossop, citing a case called Wilson versus Workman, which was a 2009 case out of the 10th Circuit that held that an ineffective assistance claim in Oklahoma is not adjudicated on the merits and is thus subject to de novo review when the OCCA does not consider non-record evidence. And I didn't mention this, but in his direct appeal, and I think in his post-conviction claims of ineffective assistance, he did file affidavits and non-record evidence in support of the claims that he was making, but the court, the OCCA, didn't consider them because they weren't part of the record, and it considered on the record only. And that is generally how appellate courts do. They're not a court of an original jurisdiction, so they don't make their own record. Their decisions are based on what's on record. The order denying both panel and en banc rehearing was entered on September 23rd, 2013, and the 10th Circuit's mandate issued on October 1st, 2013. There was an application for extension of time to file a petition for writ of certiorari filed at the U.S. Supreme Court, which was granted. Glossop did file a petition. It looks like he may have filed it. His petition was supposed to be filed in February. It was actually not filed until March 5th, but 2014, but there may have been an additional extension of time, or he may have just filed it a little late and the court heard it anyway. The state filed its brief in opposition. The case was distributed for conference on May 2nd, and his petition was denied on May 5th. Glossip also filed an amended petition for writ of habeas corpus at U.S. District Court in Oklahoma on January 8th, 2015, which was dismissed for lack of jurisdiction, because federal court, you have to file a request to file a successive writ with the 10th Circuit Court of Appeal or the Circuit Court of Appeal, and it decides whether or not you can file the successive claim in district court. And Glossip didn't do that. He filed that pro se, alleging new evidence. And we'll talk about that next week, because some of that is probably going to be covered, I guess, so to speak, in some of the claims raised on Glossip's behalf starting in 2015. And then I think at this point, I think what we can do now, I think we can call it a day. We've gone over a lot of material. And I can pick up with the 2014 clemency next week, or in 2 weeks when we do part 2.
That sounds great. There's a lot of information. You've done a ton of work. It's amazing.
And I've got 2 weeks of more work. Luckily, I'm off tomorrow, so I can get
if anybody wants to know that you didn't know about the case, my goodness.
Well, hopefully you can take the time to reread all the notes and look at some of the articles that are coming out now. And I'll email you some that I've copied and, that I've saved, and you can read those and kind of see a little bit more where this case is headed.
You can definitely tell the people who just basically spend 45 minutes on a podcast rereading Wikipedia and those that have actually done the research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I've just spent about 3 hours going through, and like I said, we finished his federal habeas claim. We haven't talked about his clemency claim, and we haven't talked about his challenge to midazolam. We haven't talked about Don Knight and his press conference, or Glossip's execution dates, which we'll talk about next time in 2 weeks.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much. Have a great happy Independence Day.
Thank
happy 4th
you.
of July, everybody.
Yeah, happy 4th of July. And thank you for listening to Based in Fact, a true crime podcast with Lisa O'Brien and Kyle. If you like the show and want to know more, you can find us on Facebook or follow me on Twitter at O'BrienLAnt. Join us in 2 weeks for episode 13, State of Oklahoma versus Richard Eugene Glossip, part 2. We'll talk about Glossip's clemency claim to the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board, the 2015 claims made by Don Knight in a successive state post-conviction claim, unsuccessful, that is, Don Knight's 2020 and 2021 request for information from the Oklahoma County DA, the claims made by Oklahoma lawmakers led by Representative Kevin McDougal, and the results of the so-called independence investigation by Reed Smith's firm commissioned by McDougal. Finally, we'll talk about Glossip's 2022 third state post-conviction application, which was filed on July 1st, 2022, after his execution date was set for September 22nd, 2022, or September 25th, 2022. We'll talk about the execution dates as well next week, or in 2 weeks. Until then, everyone have a safe and happy 4th of July, a great 2 weeks, and stay safe. Good night.